Hi. So in the last class, we have talked about, the different sources that you are going to study to frame your research or understand the research problem that you have stated. So in this subunit in module 2, we are going to talk about framing your research questions. So how do you frame research questions? It is very important to recognize that research process is iterative. By, saying that research process is iterative, I mean that sometimes you have to go back and forth between the different steps that you are learning. So for example, you may have to go back to the research problem again after you do the literature review. So you first build your research problem through a general, literature review by contextualizing, by, finding the relevance, etc. And then when you do a thorough literature review, you do a chronological assessment of different literature, a theoretical methodological assessment. Then you can go back to your problem and restate the problem a little bit. Because in doing that, you are constantly refining it. And what it leads to is help you ask the right set of research questions. So refining your research problem after a literature review would always lead you to the right research question. You have somewhat set the objective of your research through the following. So for example, you have already stated that I aim to study this and this. And then now you have thoroughly conducted your literature and you have identified the gaps in the literature. And then you found that, okay, I may need to reset my aim of the study a little bit more. In the next slide, I will be showing you what it means by identifying gaps in the literature. So gaps in the literature are missing pieces or insufficient information in the research literature, by which we mean that sometimes gaps could be the population or the sample size of the study, for example. So a research may have been conducted and it may have been conducted for individual state, but maybe the research have not looked at the entire country, all the states. So you can just increase the population or sample size by stating that, okay, so the literature looks at individual states, but if it had not looked at the national level, so I'm increasing the population sample. Or you may say that, oh, they have looked at, Alabama, but they have not looked at Georgia. So you might change the location of your research. So when you are framing your research question, you are actually becoming more and more specific to the location and the size or the type of people you are trying to research. Then there could be gaps in the method. So the methods that has appeared in the literature could, say that some level of qualitative research has been done, but we haven't looked at a bigger population size, so there is no quantitative research available. Or you may see that, both qualitative and quantitative research has been done on separate circumstances, but there is nothing to unite them together. So you may use one research where you have applied both quantitative and qualitative research to build a singular research project. So it's basically up to you and depends on the scope of your research. If it is, something that you have to conduct within a very small period of time and very time restrictive, you may see, what are the different data collection or analysis methods available to me, and whether I can finish it within this period of time, and look at that. And the gaps also could be in the data collection methods or analysis method. So for example, we talked about the research methods, and then there could be like a way the data has been collected. So that would also impact the analysis of the answer. So there could be, hourly data collected for rainfall versus daily data collection for rainfall. So you can add, okay, so the literature talks about daily data collection, and then I'm going to talk about hourly data collection, and I'm going to do the analysis in a different way. Then there are other things such as research variables and conditions. So by research variables, you have already learned from your research methods, quantitative methods or qualitative methods class, that there is independent variables and dependent variables. And then sometimes the dependent variable can be redefined in a different way. And then you can add a whole bunch of other independent variables that you think might not have been used in a different literature. So you are adding different conditions or, different variables in the research to see that whether, you are able to find something different through your analysis. If you do not find articles in your literature search that may indicate a gap, so if you are trying to find out something specific, say, whether, the gentrification was actually impacting a particular race in a population, and that never appeared in the research. It just talks about a generic, gentrification cases. Then you may just add, okay, so my research did not look at race in particular, so I'm going to look at this particular race in my study. So if you do find articles, the goal is to find a gap for contributing new research. So authors or you would be signaling a gap in the research by stating at the end in the literature review gap section that, has not been clarified, studied, reported, or explained, or further research is required or needed, and so on and so forth. Or there is some poorly understood knowledge, or there is some lack of studies. So you would be using these terms to highlight the gaps in the literature, and then building your research questions from there. So formulating a research question is to fill the information gap. And so that while you are filling this gap, you are not duplicating any other effort. For example, if somebody has already seen, or have done a particular research, then it doesn't make sense to use the same data set to make the same assumptions and same variables to just duplicate it, because it's just not adding any new information. So you might be asking these questions to me that, oh my goodness, there are so many researchers that have already worked on so many topics, and they have looked at a vast number of data sets. Then how do I ever find out something that is relevant and something that I can work on with my limited knowledge? It would be very easy to do that, because it's not possible for you to not find a topic, because the knowledge system can be expanded in so many different ways. For example, you might be using a different year's data from the research that has already been published. So what you are trying to add here is you would say, okay, the literature looks at this particular problem up to year 2015, and I haven't seen any research that has looked at the same variables after 2015. So I want to compare the condition of this particular place in geography and see what has happened since the year 2015 on so and so aspects. So having said that, you are actually filling an information gap on a particular topic between 2015 and say 2022. So you can see from this example that you can actually find information gap, but you have to be very, very clear about which information gap you are trying to close. You cannot replicate something that has already been done, but at the same time, you can replicate some part of the research that has been done and add some new knowledge into the system of knowledge or the knowledge bank of people. One thing that's so important while doing your research that it's very common for all researchers to, no matter how many years they have been researching for, to first come up with a very broad overview or a topic question. For example, I might just say that, oh, I want to study the gentrification issues in Huntsville, Alabama. So that's too broad because there can be so many gentrification issues, and there can be some good impacts, some difficult impacts of gentrification, but it's not clear from this particular topic that what exactly I'm trying to address. So the next level would be studying the impact of gentrification on recent displacements in Huntsville, Alabama. So here, the question is narrowed a little bit, more. So I'm more interested on how gentrification caused displacements of communities in Huntsville, Alabama. So here I, was able to narrow it down a little bit more. So this doesn't really stop, and there is no perfect way to narrow down a question. And because more literature you read, more in-depth study you do, you will identify more and more gaps, and you can narrow your questions down a little bit more. So from a narrowed down, topic, you can find out a more focused research question. So now you might be able to ask that, how did gentrification impact displacement of the communities between 2015 and year 2022? So here you actually give a time period, and also you are able to, mention which issue around gentrification you want to study. But do you think this is a perfect question, or you can even, do more improvement? So the way to do it is to keep evaluating your question. So evaluate your question from time to time, and that will help you to refine, reinstate, and add sub-questions to it. So if this is your question, you might want to ask, do you have enough data to measure this gentrification? How do you measure gentrification? What do you have as data? Do you have data for 2022? You might be having some data from 2015, and you may be missing something from the recent years. So how do you address those data gaps, and what do you do? So if your answer to this question, that do you have enough data or resources to answer this question, is yes, then list down what are those sources, and then evaluate if those are enough. If you think it's no, I do not have those resources, whatever question I'm asking seems like, and a very ambitious thing to do because I don't have the data. So then you have to sit down and think, how do you revise the wording of those questions or change some issue topic like displacement or something else, say job force or something that you can actually measure. So you are constantly looking at your data sources, what is available, your motivation, and you are trying to make some refinement and changes, stay as close as possible to your motivation, but at the same time, make sure that you are capable to collect enough data to answer the research question that you want to answer. So in the next class, we will be talking about the importance of data collection and how you can use it to answer and evaluate your questions. Thank you.